So as I said, this last week, in fact the last 2 weeks, have been quite a journey for me. I went and did junior high jubilee at Mo Ranch, and then came home, was home for a few days, and then turned around with our high school kids and went out to Indianapolis for this phenomenal conference. And it really has been an amazing journey in the last few weeks. It reminded me back about why I came into this work to begin with, why I started doing ministry. It took me back to a time in my life when I was a young person, and it really reminded me of how impactful the church and how camp and conference ministry was so formidable for my years growing up. You see, I was like probably many kids in the sense that I grew up in a home environment that was a little bit challenging, and so the times when we would go together and go out to camp or conference was always such a big deal to me. I remember the church that I grew up in wasn't Presbyterian, the one that I went to youth group in. We would go to conferences like this, and it would happen every year. We went out to Colorado, and for about 10 days we would drive from the Rio Grande Valley out to Lubbock and then out to Pueblo. We would go camping for a couple days, and then we would go to a college campus like we just did this last week. And we would have this great worship experience with hundreds of other people from all across the country. And then we would go back and we would camp for a few more days and go whitewater rafting and then make our way back down home again. And those 10 to 12 days were so impactful and meaningful for me as I was growing up, not only as a means of kind of just getting away and experiencing new and different things, but also being there and experiencing God in the midst of all of these wonderful things. And this last week especially was a big reminder for me of what that was like when I was a kid growing up. You see, we would take kids with us that were living down in the valley, and some of which had never even left the valley, let alone gone to another state. And I remember one of the kids that we took with us one year, we got in the church van and we're driving and we're on I-10 north of Boerne heading out towards Kerrville, and this one kid who had never seen anything but the flatlands of the deep South Texas Valley saw the hills in the hill country and went, "Are these the Rocky Mountains?" It was a reminder for us of the awe and inspiring wonder that youth sometimes see when they are unaware of the rest of the world around them and they experience it for the first time. We got to relive some of that experience with some of our youth, a couple who had never even gotten on a plane before. And I knew we were in for something really fun when we landed in Indianapolis and were at the baggage claim carousel. And Christina turns to one of the youth, and this youth is asking, "Well, are the bags going to be here?" And she said, "Well, no, it's going to take an extra hour for them to get here because the time changed from when we flew from Texas here." The kid was like, "Really?" No. And then I couldn't help myself. I had to say, after the bag had gone around the carousel one time and this particular child had missed it, I said, "Well, you better get it before it goes around again, because after 2 times they take it in the back and they give it away to Goodwill." They were really shocked again. I said, "You know what, I probably should stop making jokes like this, otherwise they're really going to be worried." But the best comment probably had to go to one of our female youth that was with us, a high school student who, when we got there, I said we have delegations from all across the country, and there was one group from Maryland, and I was really kind of sad and embarrassed a little bit about Texas that we didn't think about doing this, but Maryland, they brought the Maryland state flag, and that was kind of their sign that they would use for people to know where their group was located, and they'd have this giant stadium-sized flag that they just waved back and forth. And one of our youth turned to us on the opening night of worship and looked down at it and thought, what is that? And she asked somebody else, and they said, "Well, that's the state flag of Maryland." And she turned and said, "Other states have flags?" Not only was that the best comment of the week, I think that is the most Texan thing I've ever heard in my life. I thought about all of those things and those incredible experiences as I thought about this passage this morning. We're drawn to this passage about the parable of the mustard seed, and it's a really short passage, but it has a lot to say, even in its brevity. There's a lot of things that I came to appreciate, especially while we were in Indiana this past week in the middle of that heat wave. One of the things I've really come to appreciate is air conditioning, and the fact that we actually have real air conditioning here in Texas. One of the other youth from another church that was traveling with us said, "You know what, being in Indiana this week, it kind of felt like you're just standing in someone's mouth. It was just the humidity and the heat and the oppressiveness." And then you'd go inside, and the air conditioning wasn't like this, like powerful and nice and cold, kind of like when you walk into H-E-B and you feel that cold breeze come on you. It was more like a gentle wind that was just a little bit cooler than the rest of the air that was outside. But one of the things I really did appreciate about being up there was just the size of the trees. In fact, we would find ourselves as we're walking around the campus looking at these trees. We don't really have that as much here with the limestone rock and the formations that we have around. The trees can't get as large and tall, and we have some beautiful oak and cedar trees down here, but they're just not as tall, just as high as some of these other ones that we saw when we were there. These massive green trees that just tower into the sky 30, 40, 50 feet high, and you would just see a lot of the kids walking around and looking at them in wonder and awe. As these majestic things shoot out into the sky. I read one commentary this week that talked about these garden parables, as they're referred to. He said, the interesting thing about these garden parables, the one that we talked about last week that says, the kingdom of God is like a sower who goes out in the fields and he scatters some seed out onto the ground, and some of it falls onto thorny soil, and some of it falls onto the road, and the birds come and pick it up, and some of it falls onto good soil, and it takes root and it grows. And then there's this parable about the mustard seed. And it has a lot to differently say, and this commentary in particular, it made the statement that, the one thing to take away from all of these parables of the garden is that the kingdom of God is about disruption. But the kingdom of God is about constantly planting things in our garden that we don't expect, and maybe even sometimes don't want. The kingdom of God is about making some of these things come to life and become grown all around us. In particular, each one of the Gospels that we come to and look at, it shows us that the kingdom of God here is like a tree, it says. A mustard seed that when it grows, the tree becomes the largest tree in all of the garden, and the birds of the field come down and nest on it. Now, I thought about the beauty of the mustard seed, this idea, particularly as we were looking at the notion and the idea of worship. The scattering of the seeds and their ability to go into the soil and to rise up and to grow all around them. And I thought about that a lot as I came into this worship time. We would gather together for worship in one hall every day, and 5,000 young people from all over the world would gather, and we would all do our order of worship as we have it here. We'd offer prayer of confession and assurance of pardon. There would be a sermon and music, and just seeing all of these kids as the sound of God's mercy and grace and the call of the idea that they are the future coming of the kingdom of God would wave over them. It reminded me of the responsibility that we have to those young people. I couldn't help but think about each one of these little mustard seeds, the 5,000 of them scattered throughout this auditorium that were going to get on planes and go all the way back to their homes, that they were going to go and plant themselves into the gardens of their own church communities, their cities, the places in which they are rooted. And what is our response? I thought to myself. What do we have to say to those people, those little mustard seeds that are about to grow? I think a lot of times we don't think about the words that we say, the things that we comment about, the things that we offer, and whether or not they're really impactful. I had a moment probably about 3 or 4 months ago that really came to head for me this week. My father came and visited me, and we were standing over at my place, and he and I were in the kitchen, and Ethan was there, and he was playing Fortnite in his room, and he threw a grenade in this game that you're supposed to do, and you throw it to your enemy and kind of try to blow him up, and as he threw it, he said, "Kobe," and I kind of looked at him, and I said, "Kobe?" And he said, "Yeah, do you know what that means?" I said, "Do you know what that means?" He said, "Yeah, it's when you throw a grenade and you hit somebody." I said, "That is most definitely not what that means." And I turned to my dad because it was this beautiful moment for me of being a father and realizing that I'm older now. And I turned to my dad and I said, "Look at this, he doesn't even know. He doesn't know that Kobe Bryant is a person. Not just a person from older days, he's a recent person who has been playing basketball very recently. He exists today. He doesn't know that Kobe Bryant played basketball. He didn't know that Kobe Bryant makes these very critical shots, these idea that he kicks himself out and puts his leg out to get some space from him and a defender, and he shoots that ball up in the air, and as it goes into the net, that kids all over the country kind of adopted that when they put that shot up and get that formation together, that they shout out and go, "Kobe," and it swishes down to the end. I said, he doesn't know any of that. And I turned and I heard Ethan say, "Yeah, Dad, I don't know anything." He says, I guess I'm just dumb. And It cut me to my soul. Because I realized that the thing that I was saying, the thing that I was trying to offer to him, it didn't really mean that much, but it meant everything. I thought about that a lot this week. Every day we would gather together for delegation time. The 18 of us that flew out together, that got together and went out there, we would meet, we would just talk and ask, like, what was it about, small group time or the worship time that we had? What was it in the last 24 hours that you've seen and that you've experienced and that you've come to learn and to know? And particularly on the second full day that we were there, it kind of broke out into this discussion for them about the struggles that our young people face in this world. One of the speakers who was leading worship kind of stood up and she said, you know what, when I was growing up, I really felt like I only had 3 responsibilities. It was get good grades, don't do drugs, don't get pregnant. If you do those 3 things, you're good. You make it to 18 and you would have succeeded in life. And she said, you know what, I don't think we realize how much more the young people that live in our world today have to deal with and what they struggle with. And I was intrigued by that because that seemed to make a point of connection with some of our youth. And so as we were sitting around in this group, I would hear each one of them, and I said, what was the thing you took away from yesterday? And they said, well, we really loved when she said that thing because it's so hard for us today, and I don't think that people recognize it. And they all started to talk about the anxiety that they feel in their lives, the anxiety that they have in their world, the pressure that they have, the pressure to get good grades in school so that they can get a good job, so they can move on with the rest of their lives and they can build a foundation for themselves. The pressure that they have to live up to the expectation of what the world has told them through marketers and influencers, through social media and all these different ways that have tried to communicate to them that you have to look like this and act like this and talk like this and dress like this. The pressure that they feel sometimes even just being in school and thinking that they might not survive to the end of the day, literally. One of the young people that was there with us, it probably broke me the most when I said, so what is it that you guys do to alleviate this anxiety in your life? And almost everybody that I asked said, we don't. We just live in it. One of the young people in our group said, sometimes it gets so bad some days, I go in the bathroom and I cry and I wait until it just goes away enough that I can make it through the rest of the day. And I said, do you guys feel like you have anybody that you can talk to about any of this? And one of the youth said, you know what, it's hard. She said, whenever it is that I try to talk to my parents about it, they come back and they say, well, when I was a kid. And then we give this kind of litany response of how hard life is for us or was for us. And I get that. I think we do it a lot. We do it as a sense of nostalgia, as a way of reminiscing back to our youth. We do it in part because our parents did it. I remember my father telling me, when I was young, I had to walk uphill both ways in the snow with sandwich bags on my feet to make it to school each day. How hard it was for him. And this one youth in particular, she said, it's hard. It's hard to be able to say that what we're going through matters. And the anxiety that they really feel each and every day. I hate that this is their reality. I hate that they have to go through this. But I'm also reminded. I'm reminded of this passage, particularly. It says that the little mustard seeds that are planted, they grow up. That the ones that make it, the ones that rise up out of their roots, they grow taller than all the other trees in the garden. I think about the fact that diamonds are made out of coal that is pressurized over time. And I think as I looked out over these 5,000 young people all worshiping together, all different from the ones that I saw when I went in 2013, that they have an idea and a vision for the kingdom of God, of what it could look like, of how it could look different. And I thought to myself, how are we responding? Are we like the thorny soil that chokes out their view of the world? Are we the birds that come down on the road and snatch up that seed before it has time to really take root? Are we the good soil that nurtures and fosters and encourages them as they continue to grow to be something bigger and greater? I looked out over all of those children. I began to think, this is the kingdom of God being created all around us. And what the kingdom of God is going to look like depends on you and me and how we treat them. That will we listen to them? Will we allow them to shape us and form us and mold what the church is going to look like today and tomorrow and this year and next year? Are we going to look at the young people around us and take their opinions seriously? Are we going to allow them to shape this church for what it can be? Our parable today teaches us that the kingdom of God is breaking through in our midst. That the smallest children all around us, the ones that are disruptive, the ones that make noise, the ones that love to play with toys on the side, that they are the kingdom of God. That they are what the kingdom of God is going to look like tomorrow and the day after that and the day after that. To the God who created each and every one of these children, to the God who gives us these mustard seeds that grow into trees, to that God be all honor, glory, dominion, and power now and forever.